Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking about episode 20 of season 5 of Star Wars The Clone Wars, our big season finale. And this was a little bit of a quieter season finale than maybe I think what we're used to, but it was still a pretty strong one. So lots and lots to talk about, so let's just kind of get right into it. So we come back to start things off with just talking about the Jedi Council and what's going on with them. I think I've made it clear that I think at this point, like Mace Windu and his buddies are just being complete idiots about this. I mean, seriously, if you look, as I've said, if you look at the security camera footage that supposedly shows Ahsoka murdering that woman, it's blatantly clear that she's not doing that. So the fact that they had to have seen this, the fact that they're going with like, yeah, Ahsoka's a murderer and a traitor, it really just makes them seem like complete and utter idiots. And really, I kind of have to say that I think the writers really kind of dropped the ball on showing us why the Jedi Council would believe this. I mean, one of them even says she was in possession of the nanites or nanodroids or whatever, and that this is enough to convict her. Okay, possession of stuff that, I mean, Ahsoka does have a perfectly legitimate reason as to why she has that. Now, granted, you can question whether or not she's telling the truth, but there is a plausible alternative reason. You know what, I'm just going to let this go, because as I said, I think I've made my feelings on this issue clear. So let's talk about some of the cool stuff from this scene. Now, I do like, before we actually move on, I do like that Obi-Wan Kenobi does sort of step up there and say, like there is no way that Ahsoka would do this. And, you know, even Plo Koon was really not buying this, although he was a little bit more reserved in his reaction to that whole situation. And of course, this is exactly how it should be. Nobody knows Ahsoka better than Anakin. Like, the only person who knows Ahsoka better than Obi-Wan is Anakin. And Obi-Wan is totally not buying this, which is, of course, exactly as it should be. But anyway, let's go on and talk a little bit about the trial. Now, I really did get a big kick out of seeing the masked Jedi sort of serving as the guards / bailiffs of this. Now, you really don't normally would think of Jedi wearing masks, but if you're playing like I am Star Wars The Old Republic, when you get Jedi characters up to basically almost the level cap, they can start wearing masks. There are, of course, you know, it's an MMO, so there's loads and loads of gear, but many of the Jedi masks are very reminiscent of the the masks that we see in this episode. So as a Tor player, I got a real big kick out of that. And I also like how the guys are wielding yellow-bladed lightsabers. These are really supposedly not common at the time of Star Wars when this was happening. So, and that kind of tends to indicate that those guys are Jedi Sentinels. These are slightly different than the way Jedi Sentinels work in Tor, but basically Jedi Sentinels are Jedi who, you know, are trained to use lightsabers. They're trained to use the Force, but they're also skilled in things like using computers and investigating, and more mundane skills, but extremely useful skills. The Jedi Sentinels tend to be sort of the special agents of the Jedi. And I personally absolutely freaking love Jedi Sentinels. I think they're awesome. But yeah, anyway, we'll just kind of leave that at that. And of course, the guys have double-bladed lightsabers, which is really awesome. Now, after Ahsoka is kind of tossed out of the Jedi Order, you notice one thing they do is they take the beads from her. Now, if you're not familiar with a lot of the expanded universe lore of Star Wars, one thing is that when you go from Padawan to Jedi Knight is they cut your Padawan braid. We saw that in the Gennady Tartakovsky Clone Wars series with Anakin. Now, the way it works, though, is if you're from a species that doesn't grow hair on their head, like the Togruta, Ahsoka's species, the tradition among the Jedi is that you wear beads or something similar. And them taking that away from her is really a very much a symbolic act of stripping her of her status as a Padawan. So, really nice in keeping with Star Wars lore there. And I also like, of course, that even Yoda is willing to admit that a lot of what's going on here is that even with his powers, he can't really just use the Force to like realize like, oh, Ahsoka's telling the truth, because well, that would just be too easy. It's also part of the reason why Palpatine is able to get away with hanging out with all these powerful Jedi, and nobody realizes that he's even Force sensitive. It's the dark side clouds all, and this is of course a nod to Yoda's lines in the original trilogy. So, and stop and think about that for a minute. This means that for the better part of like more than 20 years, the galaxy was seriously tainted by the power of the dark side just because of what Palpatine was doing, which of course makes perfect sense since Palpatine is like in the literally one of the most powerful Sith Lords in all of galactic history. So yeah, I mean he's right up there with guys like the Sith Emperor from Star Wars: The Old Republic, other legendary Sith Lords like Darth Nihilus and Darth Bane, and yeah, so seriously, you don't really want to mess with Darth Sidious. Let's leave it at that. Now, speaking of what I was saying earlier about Plo Koon and Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's very interesting that when Ahsoka is really kind of lamenting her situation, she says that Anakin is really the only person in the entire Jedi Order that believes in her. So this sort of leads me to feel that she didn't even know that Obi-Wan and Plo Koon were still on her side. Now, given all the time that she's worked with Obi-Wan, and the fact that Plo Koon is actually the guy who found her as a youngling and brought her to the Jedi, and is, even if you know the expanded universe lore, he even basically said, as much as I would love to serve as Ahsoka's master, I'm just too close to her. I could not do it. I could not be dispassionate enough to train her properly as the traditions of the Jedi require. So if Ahsoka's thinking that even Obi-Wan and Plo Koon don't have her back on this, then it really helps to sell the idea that she walks away from the Jedi at the end of this episode. And honestly, it's also pretty darn heartbreaking. I mean, Obi-Wan is sort of her secondary master, unofficial master in a way. She's obviously worked with him and has learned, just through osmosis and being around him, a great deal. And, as again, her ties to Plo Koon go back to her childhood. So, really, that's a serious emotional blow for her. Now, let's go and, since we've talked about Anakin, let's talk a little bit what's going on with him. Now, first of all, we get to see another throwdown between Anakin and Ventress. And this time, Anakin just flat out beats Asajj Ventress's ass. Now, granted, Ventress does not have her lightsabers, which are a pretty serious handicap for her. But let's also not forget that, as I said, she's the one that gave Anakin that scar on his face. So, she is a very formidable opponent, and we've seen that she is up there to, go head toe-to-toe with Obi-Wan and pretty much anybody in the Jedi Order. I mean, to put it bluntly here, Asajj is about as good as they come, and here Anakin just goes and completely whips her. And, of course we get to see shades of his issues with the dark side, shall we say, where he chokes the hell out of her. But I do like that Anakin is, as angry as he is, willing to listen to reason and hear her out. And Ventress is tells him the complete truth, and I like that Anakin is he's very smart when he goes and confronts Barris. The way he takes away her lightsaber and makes her go for them, that's really smart. It shows that he can use the finesse. This is very much the sort of thing that Obi-Wan Kenobi would have done. And Anakin, of course, has always generally tended to be praised as the more hot-headed guy, the guy who doesn't really think things through. So see him pulling off a stratagem like that, it's really great, and it shows you why he is the great hero of the Clone Wars that he is. It's not just that he's awesome with a lightsaber. Now that is, again, of course, something that his thing that tends to be emphasized. But seeing him as a strategist, this is a little bit more in keeping with, I think, the tone he takes when he does ultimately end up becoming Darth Vader. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here, trying to read my own handwriting. Oh yeah, speaking of what's going on with Ventress? I'm a little what the heck going with her talking about how she and Ahsoka had stuff in common, like with the way she lost her master. Okay, all right. What's not here just really doesn't make sense. Okay, her master did not abandon her. Her master was killed. I mean, we even basically saw it happen in where she was killed by a sniper. Now, granted, she probably felt abandoned, but her master did nothing to her personally except get killed by a bad guy while trying to help people. So that particular thing really just does not make any sense at all. But anyway, I guess yeah, let's kind of wrap up talking about what's going on with Anakin. Now, as I said, the stratagem in which he outs Barris, that's really smart of him. And I think some people out there might be kind of a little scratching their head, like going like, okay, come on, this is Anakin, he's the chosen one. And Barris, puts up a surprisingly good fight against somebody as skilled as him. But again, let's not let's look at who Barris is. She's trained by Luminara Unduli, very skilled Jedi Master. Barris, we saw, survived in the arena on Geonosis. And that is a place where a lot of Jedi, a lot more skilled than older than her, and more experienced than her, didn't make it out of there. Okay, the arena on Geonosis cost the Jedi some pretty serious and experienced people. So there's that. And let's not also forget that, well, basically Barris is, if you can kind of tell, she's definitely drawn on the dark side there. She even says that she thinks Ventress's lightsabers suit her. And that's the reason she even gives when Anakin very wisely asks her, why didn't you get rid of the evidence? Which, of course, is one of the things that was flashing through my mind as soon as she grabbed those things. But again, it makes perfect sense that she does that because, she's basically fallen to the dark side. And again, the dark side has colored everything. This is one of the reasons why nobody has sensed that this has happened to her. Not her own master, not her friend, not any of the Jedi around her. And as I said, in the previously established expanded universe where this did not happen to Barris, she became a full-fledged Jedi Knight and was, just a straight-up solid good guy. It was established that she was in fact a very skilled Jedi Knight. Not one of the greats of history, but certainly somebody who was pretty formidable. So, of course, Anakin, as angry as he is, he does need to be held back a little bit here because he needs Barris alive. If he just cuts her head off or something like that, then she's no good to him. And I have to say, that was really a pretty spectacular fight between Anakin and Barris. Really just kind of Jedi going crazy in the Jedi Temple. We get a nice little cameo by Tara Sinube and a bunch of the Jedi kids. That was, I thought, a really nice little treat. And I like how, Barris holds her own for a while, but ultimately it just comes to the fact that Anakin is more experienced than her, and this is what I really liked about the fight, is just how visceral it was. It showed the fact that he was just flat out physically stronger than she was, being a pretty serious factor. And let's face it, it's hard to top the ending of that fight where he just flat out slams her into a wall. I mean, we got a little bit of that Ventress with, but man, here Anakin was just full-fledged pissed. Not that he wasn't with Ventress, but yeah, that was some pretty seriously cool stuff. And again, we get to see more of the shades of Anakin and the dark side there. Now let me see here. Okay, now coming back to the ending there with the trial. Now, first of all, some serious props to Ashley Eccleston for the way she's been really doing great stuff with Ahsoka here. I mean, just the way that she resells the line when she finds out what's going on with Barris. Is it true? I mean, it's just horror and shock and heartbreak all in one. And then we get to hear Barris's little speech about why all she does this. The Jedi have been corrupt, and they've basically, in a way, she even feels that the whole Jedi Order has fallen to the dark side in taking the role that they have in the Clone Wars. And she even says, the Council is blind, all this other stuff that she says, these criticisms that she levels at the Jedi. And The thing is, though, she's not entirely wrong. It is very easy to make the case that the Jedi have become too political, that they have become too tied with the Republic, that they let the Senate have too much sway in Jedi decisions, and that the people who are in charge of the Jedi just really don't know what they're doing anymore, that they've grown too stubborn, too set in their ways to really see what's going on around them. And of course, you can make a very good case that the Jedi were wrong to agree to take leadership of the clone army. I mean, it is established in the expanded universe. There were Jedi who flat out said this is wrong and just went off and flat out quit the Jedi Order. They were so angry about this. Now, I don't really hold with some of the more hardline stances some of the fans take in this regard. I know there are people out there who flat out said the Jedi are out there leading a slave army. Well, I'm sorry, I do not consider the clones to be a slave army, okay? They aren't slaves. It's just they've been genetically programmed to want to do this. Now, I admit that this is something of a fine line. And that there aren't... Like, if one of these guys basically wants to say, like, screw this, I don't want to go fight in the Grand Army of the Republic. I want to go, like, sell shoes. Well, it's sort of a lot of it's hinted that that's probably not really an option for them. So, exactly, are the clones slaves? Well, I personally would not consider them to be slaves. But do they have the same rights and privileges as, freeborn people in the Republic? Well, that would also be most likely not. Exactly what's going on with the clones is a very ambiguous thing. I mean, even the Jedi were saying, like, okay, we'll lead the clone army, but we're really, really not happy about this. And, of course, there's also the fact that the Jedi have explicitly been shown to not consider the clones to be slaves. They consider them to be fully independent and sentient beings. Now, granted, there are, of course, exceptions to this. Well, okay, I don't think we need to really rattle off too much more expanded universe lore. I think I might be getting people who are just familiar with the show might be a little tired about me talking about the expanded universe, especially given how much of it is inevitably going to be chucked out the window once the new Star Wars movies come out. But, c'est la vie, right? But anyway, so the really nice thing about what's going on with Barris and her confession and little speech there is that while she is in the wrong in what she did, there is certainly right in her criticisms, and it is in many ways these criticisms that are ultimately what lead to the downfall of the Jedi Order. She's basically listing the reasons why the Darth Sidious is able to destroy the Jedi Order, why he's able to brand the Jedi as traitors to the Republic. I mean, you think about what an absolute propaganda bonanza this is for Palpatine once he becomes Emperor and has the Jedi branded as traitors to the Republic. He's going to be able to point to this extraordinarily public trial, this trial where a Jedi, flat out says the Jedi Order is corrupt. I mean, man, this is like, this must be Palpatine must be thinking it's his freaking birthday when he's watching this. And speaking of Palpatine, we cannot talk about this episode without acknowledging that Palpatine has a new voice actor. Sadly, Ian Abercrombie, his previous voice actor, passed away. But he has been replaced by the one, the only, the absolutely legendary Tim Curry. Tim Curry, of course, is best known for stuff like Rocky Horror Picture Show and the movie Clue, but he's extraordinarily long voice acting resume, plenty of live action stuff. He was on Monk. Voice acting wise, right now he's actually playing G. Gordon Godfrey over on Young Justice. And again, just his little list of voice acting roles is just extraordinary. And of course, nobody quite hams it up like Tim Curry, except maybe Brian Blessed. But anyway, so Tim Curry is the new Palpatine. I gotta say, I am totally behind this. He's a great, great actor. The show is extremely lucky to have him. And honestly, I just really think it's awesome that freaking Tim Curry is in Star Wars. I mean, dude, it's Tim Curry. Okay. Now, to start wrapping this all up here. Now I like that after this is all over, at the very end, after Ahsoka's been cleared, the Jedi, the Council comes through and says like, okay, we were wrong about you, we're sorry. This was basically, we see now that this is your trial. Now, there's a whole big long list of things called the Jedi trials that Jedi have to go through in order to officially be dubbed a Jedi Knight. And the Council is basically all but flat out saying, if Ahsoka rejoins the Order, they will grant her the rank of Jedi Knight. Now, this would be giving it to her at an extraordinarily young age. I mean, Obi-Wan was like 19 when he became a Jedi Knight, which, from what I can tell, honestly does seem to be pretty close to the average. But Ahsoka's like about 16 here, so this would be really, really young. Although, to be completely fair, in the expanded universe, I think it was about 16 where Ben Skywalker became a Jedi Knight, but that's under Luke's new Jedi Order, which was basically Luke making up the Jedi Order. So, okay, we'll just leave it at that. But anyway, and again, this is actually something that, as I've mentioned before, does seem to be very in keeping, minor spoiler, for how the story of Zane Carrick kind of came to a climax in the Knights of the Old Republic comics. But again, I think it's really great that Ahsoka turns them down because, well, literally, just a few hours before this happened, she was sitting there in that cell feeling as if, except for Anakin, that the entire Jedi Order, including Obi-Wan and Plo Koon, had abandoned and betrayed her. So, really, how can you blame her for turning away from that? Now, this brings us to the scene at the very end with Anakin and Ahsoka sort of saying goodbye. Now, first of all, I love that they used a few beats from Binary Sunset, the absolutely legendary music of John Williams. And of course, that's the music that plays in the original Star Wars movie, where Luke kind of goes out and is looking at the two suns of Tatooine and thinking about, he has his own dreams, but he also has his loyalty to Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. And it's just the music that really just completely sells that and makes it such a legendary scene in Star Wars. And then there's the whole thing where Ahsoka says, I know. Now, some people have kind of interpreted this as her saying to Anakin, like, I know about you and Padme. I understand, why you have so many reservations about the Jedi Order. I certainly think that's a possibility. I mean, few people have been as close to Anakin as Ahsoka. But then again, Obi-Wan didn't figure it out, so I think there's a lot of room for interpretation there. I'm not particularly concerned with it one way or the other. I mean, maybe we'll get an answer one way or the other next season, which, from what I understand, is going to be the last season. But for the meantime, I'm perfectly fine with that scene being somewhat ambiguous. So anyway, folks, that wraps up this season and this episode. I gotta say, overall, well, basically, when they were actually focused on the main characters in this series, this was a pretty darn good season. When we had to go off and spend all those episodes with the Ferengi tube grub Commander Gascon and all this other stuff, it really took a dive. On the other hand, when it was focused on the Jedi younglings, that worked reasonably well, although it was definitely shorter than our time with Commander Gascon. But yeah, this overall pretty darn good season. We had some really cool stuff going on. As I said, we got guys like Tim Curry here. We had freaking David Tennant come in. So again, definitely had its low points, but overall a pretty darn solid season of the show. Definitely looking forward to seeing what they're going to pull out of their hats next season. It being the last season, I'm guessing things are probably going to get pretty darn crazy. Oh yeah, well, there is one more thing that I wanted to talk about before we actually wrap this up. The whole thing that when this show started and people were like learning about Ahsoka and this, they were like, okay, well, what's it going to be for her fate and how's all of this stuff? I remember seeing a thing with Dave Filoni, or him or one of the other guys behind the show, and they're saying when they were trying to figure out exactly what Ahsoka's story in this show would be, they talked about, well, when we see Anakin at the start of Episode 3, he seems to be kind of cheerful and kind of upbeat. So, he really probably wouldn't have really been that way if Ahsoka was, dead or something, which was oddly a telling comment to make. But here we kind of see like, all right, I'm sure we'll be seeing Ahsoka again next season. But if the idea that Ahsoka sort of struck out on her own and went off to left the Jedi Order to do something else, well then okay. If as long as he was felt that she was out there and that she was doing okay, it sort of makes sense that Anakin would generally be feeling all right at the start of Revenge of the Sith. And this has the additional benefit of making Anakin's outrage at the fact that he wasn't given the title of Jedi Master much more understandable. I mean, he basically knew that the Jedi had, in all but name, given Ahsoka the rank of Jedi Knight, and in doing that, Anakin would have completed like basically the main requirement of becoming a Jedi Master, is that you train somebody from a Padawan to a Jedi Knight. So, yeah, that, like I said, that makes Anakin getting really pissed off about not being given the rank of Master much, much more reasonable in Revenge of the Sith. So yeah, let's wrap it up with that. Anyway, folks, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.